and call Texas home. Uh, my background is a mix of public and private sector experience. My public sector experience was largely at the Department of Energy, where I was involved in the development of green tech and economic development activities and technology transfer. Bill from, what was his last name, Bill?
Bill Jeffries, Dr. Bill Jeffries.
Bill Jeffries mentioned, tech transition and all that sort of stuff. I did that at the Department of Energy and came to appreciate the role of government in sparking the development of new technologies, but was constantly frustrated with the inability of those technologies to actually make a significant impact in the marketplace. And even today, after the $100 billion or so that the Department of Energy has put into solar and wind technologies, it only represents about 12% of the electricity that we generate.
That's low.
It's low, but there are lots of reasons for that. Partly, it's not, it's intermittent power, and so you can't depend upon it, for your daily load until we solve some technical problems and that sort of thing. But the other big issue, that I saw was there was a huge disconnect between the market and the technology adoption. The money that we provided for technology uptake typically went to companies and communities that were not the frontline communities, were not communities that were at the forefront of the climate challenge that we have today. And so I think that was a problem that we really never solved, and I don't think it's been solved yet at the Department of Energy or by the federal government as a whole. Then I retired and went into the private sector, set up my own consulting firm. And during the journey that I had, I came across a really brilliant innovator, a disruptor, just like you, named Ed Hudson.
Hey, Ed.
Who had come up with an idea that was essentially, how do you use broadband to solve community economic development purposes? How do you understand, what the community needs are, and then develop a broadband solution that enables underserved communities to get into the digital world? And I don't know what the statistics are, but Ed, how many people aren't connected, are underserved? So 30%.
That's in the United States.
In the United States.
Right. So I'm sure that those numbers are much higher.
So that's around 100 million, and those almost all are frontline communities.
Yeah, they are.
Almost all frontline communities. And it's just the way the system is set up, that the government subsidies the private investment, the way that internet service providers lock in customers and look for new customers, skips over these communities. And so what Ed and his company figured out was how to do that, how to
last meter, last mile.
Yep, get the last mile. But the real key, which goes back to my interest, with the at the Department of Energy and my frustration, that the benefits of green tech were not going to the frontline communities, was that you needed to bridge that digital divide to bring green tech and green jobs to those frontline communities.
Doesn't happen without the connectivity.
What happens without connectivity. And so we've been working on this project together for about 4 years. And in the course of it, one of our star pupils is Daedra and
Yeah.
Luling, and I'll let her explain, what we're doing there. But just recently, David Bray, who is a longtime colleague of mine and master networker,
Mhm.
uh,
Woohoo, David.
got involved in the company that I have set up, which is called Essential Connections.
Okay.
And Essential Connections are, you bring essential digital connections to communities so that they can get essential services.
Right.
And do local community-based economic development. And David, when we explained it to him, said, you know what? I know this woman.
Yeah, he's
Sharon.
great that way. You should meet.
Who we should meet.
Yep.
And so that's how we got our partnership going.
Yeah.
I think we've been working together for 3 or 4 months.
Yep,
Yep.
at least.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I just see enormous potential, for
Me
this
too.
approach. So Deidre?
Yep. Thank you, Bill. I'm going to scoot on over here. And I am like beyond, I am just like beyond myself standing here between these two folks, and just to be able to introduce, I'm going to have Deidre introduce herself, but you are magnificent. And I am so happy that you are here today. And thank you for coming all the way from Texas to Washington, D.C. to be with us today. I really appreciate you. Who are you? Well, I know that's
so much
loaded.
for-
However you want to answer that question is fine, but they need to know you. Who are you?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me, and Bill, thanks for the introduction. I'm so full of gratitude just for the opportunity to be here and stand in front of you and share a little bit about myself and where I come from, and hopefully the direction that we are headed with technologies and Luling as a frontline community. So my name is Deidre Steens. I am a 4th generation cattle rancher. My family has been in Texas for quite some time, at least 4 or 5 generations. My family brought me home from the hospital to the property where my great grandfather used to sharecrop. And we've been there, we operate this farm. I'm also an educator in the state of Texas. I have 4 certifications. I like to keep things simple, but I've also learned that in this work, being pulled in the direction where we're needed sometimes, that you can't always be simple. Sometimes it requires you to be more than resilient and be bold, in the face of opportunities and to meet challenges head on.
You're doing a great job.
I'm nervous,
And that's okay.
but I would like to say that who I am is someone that's really committed and passionate about agriculture and opportunity for people, not just in the community where I live, but all across the country and all across the world. There's been a lot of things that I've seen, not just in agriculture, but business and so forth, and meeting people. And you understand that a lot of the struggles that people face in frontline communities could really be overcome, but there's so much red tape, and there's so many obstacles to accessing capital to, say, keep your farms running and to manage operations. And so I'm here to share a little bit more about that as we continue.
So this is an important conversation for us today, because this is where the rubber hits the road. So you've heard in the first segment about why this moment, why Green Jobs Machine. We've been challenged to say, hang on for a second, you need to make sure you're investing in the Deidres of the world. So Suzanne, hello, we're doing exactly what you want us to do, and we're going to continue to partner with organizations like Gender Smart to make sure we get that right. And so we're answering part of the question of where are we going? We're going to frontline communities. We're going to places like Luling. And I want Deidre to talk a little bit about the big freeze that happened in Texas. You read about it. She lived it. And so we want to answer the question of where, but I also wanted to talk about the who, because we are a means to an end. The Green Jobs Machine doesn't exist for the sake of the Green Jobs Machine. We exist to partner and to support businesses like yours, like ATG for You and STARS. We're not reinventing the wheel. If these guys have figured out how to make ICT work in frontline communities, we don't need to do that. We just need to partner with the people that are doing that. Because ultimately what we're after are the Daedras of the world. We're after the people on the ground, pouring into them, leveraging this incredible collective to make lives and livelihoods better. So don't get it twisted and don't get lost. This is what this is about, okay? What happened during the big freeze? What happened to your business?
During the big freeze in Texas, you saw the picture of the cattle or the cow dead. We lost a number of cattle during the freeze, about 7, not to include the babies. As a cattle producer, when you lose livestock, in a lot of senses, you're losing your livelihood. It's a challenge to be able to recover. So we lost power for about a week. Everything was shut down, not just the grocery stores, but the feed stores. Communication was definitely cut off. No one was working. We just had intermittent power at best for 7 days. So it was a really challenging time to have children, to have careers, and then to have livestock who depend on you for their basic necessities in catastrophic events.
Yeah. So Bill, one of the things you talked about earlier, you identified some of the challenges that we have. We talked about the need for public-private partnerships. We know that as private sector, we need government, we need policies, right? We need to be able to tap into the right funding that is actually for folks like Daedra, right? If we can't get government resources to help a 4th generation, farmer who's just experienced this incredible climate related event, then
So the answer to your question is that the system is not set up to help people like Daedra. It just isn't. It isn't set up to help frontline communities. And that's not a value statement. It is just a statement of fact, because the system is set up in a particular way to help promote economic development in a certain way through the Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Administration and Department of Energy, and all the major agencies have some economic development function, but it's really not focused on the needs of frontline communities. It's helping existing communities take advantage of government resources. So it's very, very hard for somebody like Daedra to get government money, government resources. I mean, she's told me that she tried to get some funding from, I think it was USDA, right? And
for those of you who are overseas, that's the United States Department of Agriculture.
And it was impossible for somebody like Daedra to manage to figure out the paperwork behind those kind of grants. And even if she got that kind of money, it was going to be very small amounts of money. It wasn't going to be the kind of money that will finance a project like the Green Jobs Machine. And then you have organizations like the Department of Energy whose mission is to combat climate change and develop new technologies and get them into the marketplace in a way that reduces our climate challenges. That's not focused on frontline communities. That's focused on those communities that can afford those technologies. It's focused on those communities that have the existing infrastructure, including broadband, that supports those kinds of investments. And so the system, not a value statement again, just a fact, is not set up to help people like Deidre. So what's the solution? The solution is disruption. People coming from the outside to disrupt the system and bring new solutions, which is exactly what Green Jobs Machine is doing and exactly what ATG and STARS is doing by looking at solutions that don't rely totally on government funding and government programs, public-private partnerships. The solutions that we're developing co-jointly with ED and ATG through Essential Connections, we don't need public funding to do the kind of things that we want to do. This is all about community-based. You're going to hear about this with the Sioux Nation project. There is some government money that could potentially be involved there, but it doesn't have to be, totally government funded.
We're not looking for grants.
And you're certainly not looking for subsidies.
Right.
I compare subsidies to crack cocaine.
Ouch.
No, it is. I mean, you get addicted to it. It doesn't really solve the problem. And what does solve the problem is economic development,
Yes.
empowerment of the community, empowerment of the individuals to be able to set the course for their community. And the way that we came across Deidre is that one of the things that we do through STARS is identify community-based needs and say, okay, Luling, Texas, what is your economic competitive advantage? What do you have a lot of? What do they have a lot of? They have a lot of land. They have a lot of land. They have a lot of open skies. Yep. And they have a lot of cattle. They have a lot of ranch. And so that's their competitive advantage. Now you combine that with the Green Jobs Machine, you've got a winning combination. You bring in solar and wind to fuel the economic development that exists in, that's going to take place in Luling, Texas. And so we did that analysis, for Deidre and company, and think this is one of the models that if we can do it in Luling, Texas.
With the fourth generation cattle rancher.
I mean,
Yeah,
We can do it anywhere.
anywhere. Absolutely.
yeah, and I would just note, not just a fourth generation cattle rancher, because there are 5, 6 generation cattle ranchers, but a Black woman cattle rancher. And I have to say, I'm from Texas, and your typical stereotype of a cowboy, a rancher, is a guy with a hat, white guy, wrestling cattle. Well, there are a lot of Deidres out there, but they are not part of the larger ranching ecosystem, really are not. And there are a lot of reasons for that. We can go into it. I mean, Deidre lives it on a day-to-day basis, but she just is not. And so this project, the Green Jobs Machine, when combined with our know-how, empowers people like Deidre, and gives them back control over their own destiny.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to release you. I'm going to say a few more words, and then I'm going to have Deidre say the last word. So we're going to peel off, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the Sioux Nation. But I also want to give, thank you, Bill. I also want to give, some love for Bill. Deidre, you have a farm to run. And for anyone who's ever been involved with farming, agriculture, it's hard work. It's backbreaking work. You don't have a lot of time to be running around looking for money to support you after you've just experienced this catastrophic event.
Right.
Why would you agree to be a champion for your community? I mean, you've experienced the deep freeze, you've had this serious impact on your own business. And then you keep finding time to go out and try to make life better for someone else. Like, what makes you tick? Like, why do this?
Yes. I think that I understand what it feels like to live in a small community and have that feeling of being stifled when you know you have so much to do. You know, there's things that have to be done, and not just on the farm, but there's business. And one of the, I have a company called Black Gold Resourcing LLC. And when I transitioned out of education and left the classroom to work full time on saving my family's farm, literally from, yes, the catastrophic events, but also from things like, taxes, and working through those challenges, because a lot of times what you find in a farming community are people who are, it's not that they're not educated, they're educated, but they don't often have the time or the connectivity to be able to manage their farms. Farming is a business. This day and age, it's almost impossible. You can't farm without managing the business side of your farm and production, and looking at the grand scope. And so Black Gold Resourcing was started to provide technical assistance and outreach to producers and small business owners in Texas, because I recognize a need in my area when looking to overcome these challenges and seeking out resources. I discovered that, okay, I'm gonna need to have a business presence actually, and create a company to do this. There are a lot of resources that we can Google and find, but it's much like you shared, Dr. Bray, about the job postings. A lot of them are just there because the companies have to meet metrics. So you'll find that there's opportunities out there and they look great, but we don't have time as farmers and producers to go and write the grants or to meet the technical needs of whatever requirements that some of these funding opportunities have. So I always say to my producers that I work with, because I do a lot of outreach in Texas and Louisiana and now Mississippi, I always say to the producers that, funding is just one small part of it. You can't continue to grow and thrive and pass on legacy operations, right, to your next generations, if we can't just get through the todays. But providing outreach has showed me that Washington has great ideas. When I go on the USDA website, and there's 29 agencies, I believe, under the USDA umbrella. And when you go on the website and you find these things, it's like, oh, no problem. Surely I can tap into one of these resources. But that's really the challenge. The great ideas are there. A lot of them come from here out of Washington, but there's a huge disconnect between those resources falling into the hands of the right people at the local levels. Luling is actually a frontline community. Back in the day, it was an oil field community. It was a booming and thriving oil field community in Texas, probably one of the first and largest oil booms that Texas experienced. Since that time, what we find as producers and landowners are that, companies, oil lease companies have come in and they've gotten what they wanted to get, and they've depleted their resources, and they've left a mess of contamination, abandoned pipelines, abandoned storage facilities on your property. How that affects people like me who are in ranching, and I know I'm talking a lot about ranching, and there's a lot more to what we do, obviously. But Luling is in Caldwell County, which is situated right next to Gonzales County, which is the #1 cattle producing county in the state of Texas, right?
And that's saying something.
Right. So we live in cattle country. So that's why I talk a lot about ranching. But understand this is kind of a widespread area from everything from farming and ranching. Where was I?
So, so you're talking about, I mean, I think ultimately you're talking about the fact that this is not just about ranching.
No.
I'd asked you why go out and champion, and you're giving us some of the social and demographic
Sure.
information on Luling. Also, one of the things I understand is that the majority of the people in Luling are over the age of 60,
Yes.
right? So you've
Yes.
talked about the fact that agriculture is big,
Mhm.
cattle ranching being a part of that. You've talked about the fact that this is a frontline community. You're
Right.
talking about that. You're talking about the fact that there's some need for remediation, as in clean this up, right? And then you're talking about how all of these factors impact your capacity to do what it is that you do,
Yes.
which is feed us,
Yes.
right? And so I want to close, and I want to go to questions and comments from folks in the room as well as perhaps online. But I want to bring us back to why we invited Deidre and the team, Bill and others from ATG for You for Stars. It's one, to help you to understand what this is all about. This is all about investing differently in people like Deidre. We believe that people like Deidre have great ideas about how to solve the challenges in your community,
Sure.
because you live that every day,
That's
right? And so too often when we're seeking to deploy capital into communities like this, it's a top-down approach. I've been a funder, I've been an asset manager for a lot of my life, and we're pretty arrogant. We've got the answers, we know, and we've got a mandate, right? Okay. And so this is a different approach. Community building isn't new, incubating businesses isn't new, running an accelerator isn't new, funding stuff isn't new. Bringing all those playbooks together and tech enabling the process so that we can collect data about what's happening in Luling and then begin to understand how we can take that somewhere else. But that's not all of it. We are trying to fundamentally correct how capital flows to people like you. And the only way that we can do that, Deidre, is by listening to you, which is why you're here, because you have something to say.
Yes.
And so when you think about the Green Jobs Machine, I want you to think about the fact that we're a collective. We're not going to try to replicate Bill's business or Ed's business. We're going to support those businesses. We're going to bring them into the fold and say, how can we serve? And then we're going to listen to people like Deidre, because every community that we go into, we need to identify the local champions like her. Y'all didn't even know that she existed. And now here she is, right? And so we need to listen to you. We need to be humble, because we believe in proximity.
Absolutely.
We believe that the people like you who are in close proximity to the challenges are the people who have the solutions that, with the right support,
Yes.
are bankable.
Yes.
So we
Absolutely.
believe in you,
Thank
Deidre.
you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. And so close us out. But we're gonna pop up a quick slide so that you can see the project structure that we're thinking about for Luling. But let me give you the last words. What do you want people to know about you, about Luling, about resiliency, and how maybe some of the activities of ATG for You and Bill and others have impact? It's up to you. What do you want to close us out with?
I'd like to close out with the statement you made. There are a lot of Deidres out there. There are a lot of women in agriculture. There are a lot of women who are focused on tech and climate. And just, again, as a woman.
Even cattle rancher?
Oh, absolutely.
Even
There's
cattle
more of
ranchers.
me.
And you're a cattle rancher and you're interested in carbon capturing and all this green tech stuff? Really?
Most definitely. I will tell you that a hot topic amongst the producers that I work with and do outreach for is cover cropping. And people say all the time, and these are experienced ranchers from all different backgrounds, and they say, what is cover cropping? What is that? Well, cover cropping is nothing more than a sustainable and regenerative practice in agriculture. It's planting seeds from different types of, a variety of different plants. And they do functional things like sequester carbon in the soil, like help to remediate oil field sites where they've had, spills and different things. Cover cropping is also a hot topic right now, just in green tech because of the soil remediation and also the remineralization of the soil that can be done with planting. We talk to producers a lot through the Soil for Water initiative with the National Center for Appropriate Technology on ways to help do things like keep the ground covered, so we're not losing water from the soil. And then we don't have to water so much, to make up for what we're losing. In the Midwest and also in the Gulf region, there has been a lot of work that's been done to improve the soil and the characteristics of the soils after being cropped for years and years, and then sprayed either with aerial spraying or nitrogen fertilizers, which over time actually compact our top layer of soil. And it makes us think that, oh, my grass isn't growing, oh, my crops aren't coming up fast enough, I need to put more. And actually that's doing more harm. These toxins seep into our groundwater sources. So, the work that we do through Black Gold Resourcing in attending workshops and conferences and speaking to landowners like with the Texas Water Resources Institute, a lot of times we forget about water.
Right.
Water and agriculture go hand in hand. So it's vitally important that, we continue to have opportunities, and a lot of those opportunities come through the fact that, we need tech. We rely on tech to get the word out. We rely on tech and agriculture to provide outreach across the United States to different producers. So we're not having to converge, and travel into cities and leave our farms. I think that, post-COVID, that's been one of the, it's been a big takeaway for me that I've been able to be sharpened by people who have invested time in me, because we can do that and I don't have to physically be present. I can get online, we can have Zoom calls, workshops in ag. A lot of them depend on Zoom, and so many people are here for it. We're here for it. Our communities need to not feel suffocated. The individuals in these communities need to know that they have opportunities, that the colleges and universities in our areas are providing tracks to provide certification and other job skills that they'll need to transition to go into green jobs.
All right. Well, listen, we are all about it, and we are going to be heading to Luling, Texas. We're going to be partnering with ATG4U and STARS to invest differently in people like Deidre. We're going to track our performance. We're going to aggregate data. We're going to figure out what's working, what's not working, and then we're going to extrapolate, and we're going to take those lessons to the next community. And we're going to do this in a way that's commercially viable. As you can see, I don't know. I think Deidre is banking rate. She's past banking feasibility. Okay. And so the point is that there are lots of opportunity, but we need to have the right architecture that allows us to de-risk and to go in and to make these investments, and then to shore up the investments so that we generate a return, not just for our investors, but more importantly for the communities and the people that we invest in. So please give some love to Deidre.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're awesome. Give me a hug. You did great. Thank you. All right, so we got Brian for 10 minutes and then Eric. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the one pager that I was going to show you in terms of the project information. Please be in touch with us, and we will share additional information with you. We'll share additional information with you about this and the other strategic projects that we are involved in, and we're super excited about the possibilities. Before I invite Brian to speak, I wanted to also just take a moment and just to thank Dr. Bray for making available some copies of this report. Please be in touch with us online, and we can send you an electronic version as well. And this is the report of the Commission on the Geopolitical Impacts of New Technologies and Data. We've got friends in high places. And so we've got friends who are serious technologists. And in this report details some of the technologies that we're going to be investing in and some of the technologies that will support us in our endeavors to invest differently in others. Okay, so for those of you who are here in person, if you want to grab a copy before you leave, they're here for you. Okay, all right, so let's move on. And I want to take this opportunity to invite Brian. So Brian, make sure you're ready. You're locked and loaded. Yeah. Okay. So
yes, as much as I can be. Yes.
Good stuff. And so Brian is another member of our collective, and he's coming to us from Cardiff in Wales. So Brian, I want you to do the 60-second version of who you are.
Okay, I'm Brian Hughes. Obviously, I'm a Welshman, but I was brought up by 4 very powerful and very special women who taught me what the contribution that women should be playing in our lives on a daily basis. So I just wanted to get that across. I'm a designer by profession. I was born in 1951, so I've seen the rise of economies in South Wales, which was built on coal. And Deidre's comments about the oil industry in Texas rang very loud bells with me, because over the span of my lifetime, we've seen full employment through the coal industry. And then as the demand for coal ebbed away, communities were left high and dry. And so there's interestingly direct parallels between the sort of work we've been promoting in South Wales and the communities there, and also I recognize the Luling, Texas issues fully. The project that we have been developing with the Sioux Nation in South Dakota really stemmed from an introduction by a Canadian gentleman called Mike Morrow, who introduced me to Chief Bart and Dennis Ix, who I shared with them a project that we are developing in South Wales called The British, which is a very small community to the north of me here in the Welsh Valleys, which is a site which is suffered from huge industrial spoilage over the years, and has been laying in disuse for many years. And the leader of the council, a man called Anthony Hunt, when I met him, I said, "What do you need?" And he said, "I need jobs. I need jobs. I need high quality jobs. I need jobs that are sustainable, that can breathe life into my community." And so we developed a project for the British, based around renewable energy. The site generates around 8 gigawatt hours of renewable energy, which would run the small community, but more importantly, would actually allow us to power new industries, particularly food production, because our business our approach is really built upon 2 principles: energy security and food security. The 2 things are matched together. So at the British, we are developing 8 gigawatts of renewable energy that is being used then as a catalyst to bring forward new forms of employment and also to provide energy security to that community. And I am aware from news reports that we got here in the UK about the blackouts in Texas. And of course, that would not happen here in the UK. But in Luling, Texas, that obviously did happen. And that wouldn't have happened if there'd been a community, a resilient infrastructure there feeding energy into that community. The British became the catalyst for the Sioux Nation regeneration project, which I shared with Chief Bart and the people there. And really it centered around, what is the resource? Well, there's a lot of sky, there's a lot of land, and there's a lot of water, because part of the reservation borders the Missouri River. And based upon that, we are proposing a project that would produce 7 gigawatt hours per hectare of land. It would be decentralized energy, so it's grid independent, so we don't have no requirement for a grid. The energy is generated locally, it's used locally, both for running industries and new industries, etc. But where there's spare capacity, that we would obviously look to export energy, particularly in the form of green hydrogen, because it's a relatively easy product to export once it's liquefied. But everything that flows from that renewable energy is a catalyst for economic development. And that brings forward all of the things that I've talked about around energy and food security. So we can not only feed the community, empower the community, but we can also export food to other markets. So we can create revenues, which can then be plowed back into the community for all of the things that the Green Jobs machine is actually set up to do. And so that's, in a nutshell, is what we're seeking to do. All of the projects that we seek to bring forward are built on the principles that we don't need government support, that we can do this without government support, that we can use private capital. And it was interesting that something that Bill Valdez said about dependency cultures. Dependency cultures exist here in these communities as well. And that is, they become dependent upon government handouts. And that also sort of spills over into companies. Anthony Hunt, I said to Anthony, well, what have you done about economic regeneration? He said, we can't get anybody to come here. We can't get anybody to come here because we haven't got any golden handouts to attract them here. So again, what we're trying to do is to break that system. What's interesting about the Luling Sioux project is its ability to be its modular approach. And what we seek to develop over time is about 1 terawatt of renewable energy on the land there. And there are multiple locations where we can do this because the climatic conditions are the same. But of course, we're also aware of the Tribal Nations Bill and the infrastructure that's funding that's on offer from the US government, which we would obviously avail ourselves of, because obviously that would then mean that our investors, private investors, would be able to see a much quicker return on their funding than they would if we were just using it as private investment only. But all of the projects that we bring forward are both commercially viable, they're profitable, and they are methods for changing the way that we think about how communities can exist and develop and be successful on every front. So that's really what the platform that we have been developing, and it's been wonderful to become involved with GJM, and partly because it's nice to know that I'm not alone. That there are other people. There are other people as stupid as me who actually believe in change.
We are optimists, and we believe that we can change the world using this approach.
Exactly.
So thank you. We actually do believe that. Simone, can I ask you just to pull up the visual? And so what I wanted to do is to take you, because our strategic projects all have some things in common. One, they're in frontline communities, right? And so, Brian, I'm sure you can see the screen. And so
yes.
You can, right. And so you can go back to Luling. And so one of the things that I wanted to do, and we'll come back to the Sioux Nation project. And so as Brian indicated, he's a Welshman. He's sitting there in Cardiff. We went over to Cardiff and we visited him, and it was a good time we had there. And Brian is, he's an engineer, he's a designer, he's raised tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds, for investment in renewable energy projects right at the community level. And I mention that to say, we didn't start doing this yesterday. Like we know how to raise capital, and we know how to deploy capital for projects, right? And so Brian was invited to be involved with the Sioux Nation project. And so we're going to get to that, but we're also involving him with Luling, Texas, because in most of these frontline communities, we don't just have a connectivity issue. In case you're not aware, connectivity is like a human right. Economic development doesn't happen without connectivity. So there are hundreds of millions of dollars every year that can't be deployed in these communities because you can't connect to the people that you want to service, right? And so one of the ways that we're going to continue to generate revenue that helps us to pay back our investors is by investing in ICT and telecommunications, data centers, and the connectivity that we need for the platform. You can't aggregate data someplace where you can't connect. Right? So in order for the tech to work, we got to connect. So we said, well, let's be strategic. So our strategic vision is to leverage advancing technologies, including ICT and communications technologies, to not just to help ourselves to do what we want to do, which is aggregate data for our resilience index, but we want to be able to allow people like Deidre to better run her business because we're going to invest in her, right? So if you look at Luling, Texas, the predominant play is an ICT and data play, right? With renewable energy and other kinds of investment opportunities being part of it, right? So here, what we want to do in terms of our strategic project is to demonstrate how connectivity can make a huge difference in people's lives, and how we can invest differently in frontline communities in a way that's commercially viable, even with like 4th, 5th, 6th generation cattle ranchers. Great. All right, so then let's go to the next slide, which is our second strategic project here in the United States is going to be with the Rosebud Sioux. And I don't know if Chief Bard is on the platform, but when we first met Chief Bard, and he's a man of gravitas for sure, he said, I'm not just the chief of the Sioux in South Dakota. I'm chief of the Sioux across 10 states, right? So if we get it right in South Dakota, we can roll this across the entire community of at least 100,000 people. That's important for data gathering, right? And so with the Sioux Nation strategic project, we want to demonstrate our capacity to invest differently in energy. Connectivity is a part of this as well, right? Transport is a part of this as well. So climate tech by its very nature is interconnected. Just like investing in renewable energy is interconnected. Because if you don't have transportation, how do you get your energy to the place where people are going to buy it if you're not consuming it all yourself? So this is just a couple of the, I'm sorry, there seems to be an echo. So can I just ask you if you're here to just mute? Yeah, you got it? Okay. So there's lots of resources, government funding that I think we can tap into to get through what essentially is pre-feasibility. But some of the other opportunities is what I wanted you to speak to, Brian. So in addition to at some point being able to produce up to a terawatt, and we're talking about concentrated solar power, we're talking about wind, and we're talking about PV as well, in terms of green hydrogen production. What are some of the other, and we're going to be quick because we're being told we need to wrap up this session. What are some of the other investment opportunities that are present in this project, Brian?
Well, the energy, of course, needs to be put to work. One of the areas that we are looking at is high value food production, particularly in the area of aquaculture. So we've been looking very hard at salmon production on land as a very high nutrition crop with high value, etc., which produces excellent returns on investment, around about 30% IRR. as well as all the other good stuff that comes from that. So we're looking at aquaculture, which is salmon farming, shrimp production alongside that, and then plant production, which would probably involve things like strawberries, and this is 365-day production. The energy integrated model that we've developed occupies 2.5 hectares of land, produces 7 gigawatt hours of renewable energy, and it would also be applicable to Luling in Texas. A hectare is 2.5 acres of land. So once you've built it, it requires nothing else. It's pretty low high tech, etc. I won't go into too much detail, but it's something that could be built in many locations, and would also introduce another form of food production. I mean, Deidre was talking about obviously her cattle ranching and so on and so forth. It would help that, and it would also help with soil in terms of releasing soil to regenerate, which is a big issue around the world, not just in the US. So there's multiple benefits that flow from that catalyst of that renewable energy, and then the work that you put it to. So whether that's obviously energy in the first instance, energy as a product that's exportable, food production that can be consumed locally, energy that can be used locally, and then food that can also then be exported. And all of this takes the pressure off things like soil, and also in other parts of the US where the salmon, for example, has been part of the tribal nations culture. It allows those farming, those sea stocks to regenerate. So it has a multiple knock-on effect. And it just creates this opportunity for communities to be self-sustaining, resilient, and to share in the profitability of the ventures that we would like to bring forward, which they co-own.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Listen, one of the other things that I think is interesting about this project is the fact that there's a transportation corridor, right?
There is.
Yeah. And so we can actually transport the energy that we produce.
Correct.
Many of you may be aware that not far away, there is major investment happening in one of the largest green hydrogen production facilities, supposedly in the world. So green hydrogen is not a thing of science fiction. It's science fact today. And so we're super excited about the opportunities to get this work off the ground in South Dakota, and then to look at how we can again extrapolate and do some similar things in Luling, Texas. And so this is real. And so the point of this segment was to land this so that you can begin to understand, how we're planning to go to the market, the kinds of projects that we're looking to invest in as a start. We are looking for green unicorns for sure. We are a venture capitalist without excuse or apology. But along the way, we believe that there are a lot of second and third base hits. There are a lot of just good, solid businesses that put food on the table, that help people to educate their children and help them to pay for healthcare and the kinds of things that they need in their community. We plan to invest in those too, right? So this was the point of this segment. We're going to head to Luling, Texas. We're going to head to Sioux Nation. Join us. Don't just read about us in Time Magazine. And so I wanted to just hit the pause button to ask, are there any questions or comments also from the incredible GJM team, which many of you are virtual? What have we missed? Please take a minute and jump in here. And if there are any questions or comments from the folks who are attending virtually that you might want to flag. No, nothing yet. Okay. All right. Fantastic. All right, Brian, we're going to close out this segment. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to head home. And then, we don't want you to go away. We always just keep getting better and better. So we're going to be talking, we're going to bring up Daniela Tyrell, like Forbes. Oh, how could I forget our friends at Forbes? We've got Forbes Ignite, Will Thompson, who's going to be coming up next. He's got a panel discussion. We are happy. We are very, very grateful to the Stimson Center for their support. This is one of the few bipartisan think tanks, real bipartisan think tanks in Washington, D.C. Please go to www.stimson.org and take a look at the incredible work that the Stimson Center is doing. Forbes Ignite, I will let Will tell you more about what they're doing. And we are very, very proud to have them be part of our session today. So we're going to take a quick break. Don't go away. Stretch, hug somebody, get some, refreshment. If you do not have good coffee and stuff like we have over here, then you got 30 minutes to go get some and then come back, right? Because we're going to have an exciting and wonderful and insightful time with Will Thompson and others. And then we're going to wrap up the day talking about agritech and agriculture and the investment opportunities there. We've got one heck of a network, and we're seriously proud of the people who do incredible things. So thank you. And please feel free, if you are on the network, on the platform, to share this link, tell people great stuff. Only your friends though, because this is a soft launch, that there's great stuff happening here. All right, so we'll see you in 30 minutes. Thank you.
In this land of an hour, the colors Bahira. In this land of an hour, the colors Bahira. Ubiga tella you.
Jombade unyini ngara